"Get out of my store." The manager's voice exploded through the showroom, his fingers stabbing toward the exit like a blade. Instantly, every head turned, every conversation stopped, the air thick with rage. Then it came, the slap, sharp, brutal. His hand cracked across the black woman's face, echoing like a gunshot. She staggered, but didn't break. Slowly, she touched her cheek, met his eyes and whispered, calm and cold, "Your store." Those two words hung in the silence like thunder on the horizon, a warning that his world was about to crumble. The sleek black Tesla Model S slid to a stop at the curb outside Electramax's glittering Fifth Avenue flagship. Crowds of well-dressed shoppers streamed past without giving a second glance to the woman climbing out of the driver's seat. Why would they? In her faded jeans and gray hoodie, she looked like any ordinary New Yorker running errands on a Saturday afternoon. That was exactly what Olivia Carter wanted them to think. Behind the tinted glass of the store's doors, the world glittered. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above rows of smartphones locked in glass cases, each device gleaming under the lights like jewelry. Laptops sat on pedestals as if they were thrones. Shoppers in tailored suits and designer heels floated from display to display, sipping complimentary sparkling water while sales associates trailed after them with practiced smiles. The atmosphere screamed exclusivity. This was not a store, it was a stage where wealth was the ticket in. Olivia paused, adjusting the hood over her neatly styled hair, taking a long breath before stepping forward. To anyone else, she was just another face in the crowd, maybe someone looking for a budget phone. But Olivia wasn't just anyone. She was the founder and CEO of Electramax, a self-made billionaire who had clawed her way out of a childhood spent in foster care. She had built this empire from nothing, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, insult by insult. Every sparkling display inside that store was the result of her vision, her sacrifice, her refusal to be dismissed by the world that once told her she would never belong. At 16, while other kids played video games or hung out at the mall, Olivia was flipping burgers at dawn, stocking shelves in the afternoon, and mopping office floors at night. Her hands blistered, her back ached, but her eyes never lost focus. She scoured yard sales for second-hand business textbooks, highlighting every page until the margins bled with notes. College didn't come with family money or trust funds, it came with ramen noodles and exhaustion. She was the girl dozing off at the library computer lab at 3 a.m., still clutching a finance book. Professors whispered about her brilliance, but she saw something even they didn't, an opportunity. When she graduated, she had only $1,200 to her name. No investors, no safety net, just a head full of ideas about how electronics retail could be different. The giants, Best Buy, Amazon, the chains that dominated every strip mall, laughed at her. What did a young black woman with no connections know about disrupting an industry run by old money and entrenched names? But Olivia didn't need their permission. She rented a garage the size of a shoebox and started Electramax. Her philosophy was simple but revolutionary. Luxury electronics weren't about selling the most expensive product, they were about delivering an experience. Every customer, no matter how they looked, no matter how much they could spend, should feel valued, respected and heard. That belief turned into stores in 12 states, $50 million in annual revenue, and a reputation for customer loyalty that even the giants envied. But as the empire grew, Olivia knew what all leaders feared: culture could rot from the inside without anyone noticing until it was too late. And lately, whispers had reached her ears, reports of certain customers being ignored, complaints that those in hoodies or sneakers were dismissed while men in tailored suits were worshipped. Olivia had read those complaints, and they tasted like poison. If Electramax was becoming just another snobbish brand, then everything she fought for, every night she had gone hungry, every humiliation she had swallowed, would mean nothing. That was why she was here. Not as CEO Olivia Carter, the billionaire featured in Forbes, but as Olivia Carter, the ordinary woman in jeans and sneakers. Today wasn't about the quarterly board meeting in 2 hours. Today was about the truth. Could she still trust the people running her empire to live by her values when they thought no one important was watching? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her assistant. "Board meeting in 2 hours, Miss Carter. Do you want me to send the car?" Olivia stared at her reflection in the Tesla's glossy window, the hood shadowing her face, transforming her into someone invisible. "No," she replied, her voice steady, "I'm driving myself today." As she pulled the glass door open, she saw him immediately, Michael Harris, the store manager. Mid-40s, hair gelled to perfection, suit pressed within an inch of its life. He strutted between displays like a monarch surveying his kingdom. His smile was all teeth and calculation, a salesman's grin stretched too tight, hiding disdain beneath. Olivia's stomach clenched. She knew his type, the kind who thought authority was a crown and customers were peasants. Michael's voice cut across the store like a whip. He was scolding a young associate, Daniel Lopez, if she remembered his file correctly, for wasting time with an elderly woman. The customer, hunched over a walker, had been listening to Daniel patiently explain a basic smartphone. Michael's words were loud enough for the woman to hear. "Don't waste time on tire kickers, Lopez. She's not buying anything." The shame on the woman's face made Olivia's blood boil. She hadn't even crossed the showroom yet, and already the rot was on full display. Olivia exhaled, keeping her face neutral, her movements casual, but inside, she felt the storm gathering. This wasn't going to be a quick stop. Today Michael Harris was going to show the world exactly who he really was, and Olivia was going to make sure of it. The moment Olivia Carter stepped inside, she felt the shift in air. The glass doors closed behind her with a hiss, sealing her into a world built to dazzle the wealthy and dismiss everyone else. A security guard near the entrance instantly locked onto her, his gaze following her like she was already guilty of something. His hand twitched near his radio, but he didn't move. She smirked under her hood. Perfect. The test had already begun. Michael Harris prowled the store like he owned the place. His suit jacket caught the chandelier's light, his Italian shoes clicked against marble tiles with the smug rhythm of a man convinced the world belonged to him. Every step was a performance, every nod to a wealthy customer rehearsed 1,000 times. He had the air of a game show host and a dictator rolled into one. Olivia watched him glide past a young couple in designer coats. He turned on that blinding fake smile, gesturing toward the $3,000 laptops like a preacher offering salvation. "Now this is what success looks like, folks," he purred, his voice dripping with charm. But the charm was a weapon, one he wielded only on those he thought mattered. Jessica Miller, his assistant manager, hovered a step behind, her eyes constantly darting, calculating, afraid. She looked like she wanted to vanish into the glossy floor every time Michael opened his mouth, but the weight of rent and an 8-year-old daughter's medical bills chained her silence. And then there was Daniel Lopez. 22, earnest eyes, Electramax polo shirt slightly rumpled after a long shift. He was crouched beside an elderly woman, gently explaining how to send a text on a budget smartphone. His patience radiated kindness, his smile genuine. Olivia noticed it, and more importantly, so did Michael. Michael's footsteps grew sharper as he approached, his face darkening like a thundercloud. "Lopez," his voice cracked across the store, sharp enough to make customers flinch. The old woman blinked in surprise, tightening her grip on her walker. "Are you kidding me? We don't have time for window shoppers. You're supposed to be moving product, not babysitting someone who doesn't even know what a touchscreen is." The shame that crossed the woman's face was a dagger. Daniel opened his mouth to defend her, but Michael cut him off with a sneer. "This isn't a charity. Save your lectures for the library, kid. We need real sales." With a sharp flick of his wrist, he dismissed them both and stalked away. Olivia's jaw tightened under her hood. She had already seen enough to know her suspicions were right. But she wasn't going to walk out. No, this show was just getting started. She wandered toward the premium smartphone display, letting her fingers trail along the sleek glass. The phones inside glittered like diamonds, each one priced well over $1,000. To Olivia, they were old friends, her designs, her partnerships, her empire. To Michael, they were bait for the rich, and she didn't look like someone worth dangling bait for. He spotted her almost immediately. His eyes flicked over her hoodie, her jeans, her sneakers. In an instant, the calculation was complete. Not worth it. He turned his back, beelining toward a man in a navy Armani suit, who had just stepped through the doors. "Welcome to Electramax, sir," Michael practically sang, rushing to shake the man's hand. "You look like someone who knows quality when you see it." Let me personally show you our exclusive collection. His voice rose just loud enough to make sure Olivia could hear every word. The implication was clear, she wasn't exclusive. Olivia waited, she let him perform for the man in the suit, showering him with compliments, laughing too loud at every joke. Customers began to notice the imbalance, their eyes flicking from the ignored woman in a hoodie to the manager bending over backward for someone who looked rich. The contrast was embarrassing, even before Olivia made her move. She cleared her throat softly, just enough to be heard. "Excuse me," she said, her tone polite, measured. "Can you tell me more about the flagship phone here?" She pointed at the sleek model under the glass. Michael barely turned his head. His lips twisted into a half-smirk, as if the very idea of her asking was laughable. "That one," he drawled, his voice dripping with disdain. "Might be a little out of your price range, but hey, there's a pawn shop down the street, you might find something that works for you there." The words hit the air like acid, a hush fell over the section of the store. The Armani customer blinked, uncomfortable, while an older man in a wool coat frowned disapprovingly. Even Jessica winced, her nails digging into her clipboard. Daniel froze where he stood, his face flushing red. He took a step toward Olivia, ready to intervene, but Michael's glare cut across the room like a knife. "Don't," Michael hissed, low but sharp enough for Olivia to hear. "Don't waste your time, she's just browsing. Focus on real customers." Every syllable dripped with contempt, not just for Olivia, but for anyone who didn't fit Michael's definition of worthy. His voice was harsher now, more raw, less corporate polish and more gutter cruelty. "You can spot them a mile away," he muttered to Jessica, his tone laced with arrogance. "Cheap sneakers, hoodies, no jewelry, trust me, these people don't buy. They loiter, they waste time, and then they leave." He chuckled, a humorless, ugly sound, "and I don't have time for losers." Olivia's face remained calm, her posture steady. Only the subtle tightening of her jaw betrayed the fire simmering beneath. Around her, the other customers exchanged uneasy glances. Phones began to lift discreetly, cameras rolling. They sensed it, the story was escalating. Michael thought he was winning. He thought he had put her in her place with a few cruel lines. What he didn't realize was that every word out of his mouth was another nail in his own coffin, hammered in front of a growing audience. And Olivia Carter, the woman in the hoodie, wasn't going anywhere. Olivia didn't leave the smartphone counter, she didn't storm out, didn't flinch, didn't even let Michael see the sting of his words. Instead, she let her silence weigh heavier than the chandeliers above. Then, slowly, deliberately, she turned away from the phones and walked toward the centerpiece of the store, the premium laptop display. The laptops gleamed on their pedestals like trophies in a shrine. Each one cost at least $3,000, some models climbing past $6,000. These were the machines meant for executives, creators, the wealthy elite, and here she was, hoodie, faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, walking straight into the heart of Michael's kingdom. Customers noticed, whispers followed, Michael's eyes tracked her like a hawk. His jaw clenched so tight the vein in his temple throbbed, he strutted over, shoes clicking like gunshots. When he reached her, his smirk was colder than the marble floor. "Ma'am," he said, his voice coated with venomous politeness, "those start at $3,000. You might want to check the library down the street. Free Wi-Fi, free computers. No charge." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice into a sneer. "More your speed, don't you think?" The words hit like a slap sharper than the one to come. Around them silence fell again. Grace Kim, the businesswoman browsing nearby, froze mid-step. An older couple exchanged looks of disgust. Jessica's cheeks flushed crimson, her clipboard trembled in her hands. Olivia didn't blink. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. Instead, she slipped her hand into the front pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a piece of black titanium. The room seemed to inhale at once. The American Express Centurion card. The black card. The kind of card that required six-figure incomes and spotless credit scores. The kind of card that had no limit because the bank already knew the holder could afford anything they wanted. Olivia set it gently on the glass counter, like a queen placing her scepter down in front of a court. Michael stared. For half a second, his confidence wavered, his smirk faltering. His brain short-circuited. Hoodies didn't come with black cards. But instead of reconsidering, he doubled down. He snatched the card off the counter, holding it up like evidence in a trial. His voice rose loud enough for the entire store to hear. "This better not be stolen." His laugh was sharp, ugly. "Yeah, I've seen this scam before. Hoodies walk in with fake cards, think they're slick. Not today." Gasps rippled through the store. Grace Kim's jaw dropped. The elderly couple shook their heads in disbelief. Jessica whispered under her breath, "Oh my God." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. Michael wasn't finished. He held the card high, as if he were about to snap it in half. "I'll need 3 forms of ID. Driver's license, passport, maybe a birth certificate, if you got it stuffed in those jeans. And don't even think about getting upset. I'm calling the bank to verify this thing right now." His laughter was hollow, manic. He wanted the audience. He wanted everyone in that store to see him humiliate her. "You know what happens with these people," he said loudly, pacing in front of Olivia like a guard dog. "They roll in looking like they just crawled out of a bus station, flash a card they borrowed, and hope nobody calls them out. Not on my watch. Not in my store." The venom dripped with every syllable. His tone wasn't corporate anymore. It was raw, guttural, ushery, like a bouncer outside a dive bar, not a manager in a luxury electronics store. "You think you're clever. You think you can play me." He jabbed the air with her card. "You're nothing but a time waster with an attitude." Olivia retrieved the card from his hand calmly, her face unreadable. But inside, her pulse was steady, her fury sharpened to a blade. She slipped the card back into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and dialed. Her voice was quiet, but carried through the silence. "Robert, pull the employment files for the downtown store staff." "Yes, all of them." "And Robert, come down here. Now." She ended the call, simple, efficient, deadly. Michael's eyes lit up with triumph, misinterpreting everything. He threw his arms out theatrically, addressing the other customers as if they were his jury. "Oh, look at this," he bellowed. "She's calling her crew. What's next, huh? A little show? You gonna bring your friends down here to cause trouble? Let me tell you something, sweetheart. This place is wired with security cameras, and I got the NYPD on speed dial. Try me, I dare you." The customers recoiled. His paranoia was spiraling, his words spilling faster, nastier, louder. Grace Kim's lips pressed into a thin line of disgust. The elderly man in the coat muttered, "Unbelievable." Even the security guard near the entrance shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Olivia with doubt in his eyes, now instead of suspicion. Jessica whispered urgently, "Michael may be just," but he snapped around and barked at her. "Shut it, Jessica. Don't you dare undermine me in front of a thief." The word hung in the air like poison. Daniel couldn't hold back any longer. He stepped forward, his voice shaking with fury. "She hasn't done anything wrong. Everyone deserves respect, no matter how they're dressed." Michael turned on him with a snarl, veins bulging in his neck. "Respect? For her? Don't be stupid. You think customers like that keep the lights on? You think hoodies pay for marble floors and chandeliers? No. They don't belong here. And if you can't get that through your thick skull, Lopez, then maybe you don't belong here either." The silence was absolute. The words echoed through the store like an executioner's verdict. Olivia studied Daniel, saw the fire in his eyes, the risk he had just taken. One man choosing dignity over obedience, one man willing to stand up when everyone else stayed silent. She tucked that detail away. And as Michael straightened his tie, puffed out his chest, and sneered down at her, Olivia Carter knew this performance had reached its climax. The customers were filming. The staff were shaking. And the call she had just made was already bringing justice through the door. Michael Harris thought he had won. He had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. The tension in the Electromax showroom was electric, humming through the chandeliers and vibrating against the glass cases. Olivia Carter stood steady, her hood casting a faint shadow over her face, her hands relaxed at her sides, as if she hadn't just been accused of theft in front of 50 strangers. The silence that followed her phone call pressed in on everyone, heavy and suffocating. Michael Harris broke first. His laugh was harsh, jagged, too loud. It bounced off the polished walls and rang false in every ear. You wanna call people? Fine. Call whoever you want. Call your boyfriend, your cousins, the whole damn block if you need backup. He jabbed a finger toward her chest, his grin feral. This is my store, I run this place, and people like you don't get to make demands in here. Olivia tilted her head slightly, her voice calm, controlled. I'd like to speak to the owner. The words sliced through the room. It was such a simple request. Every customer had the right to escalate when they felt mistreated. But Michael's reaction was anything but professional. His body snapped back, then forward, like someone had insulted his mother. The owner, his laugh was cruel, dripping with mockery. Lady, the owner doesn't talk to people like you. The owner is on a yacht somewhere, making real money off real customers. He stepped closer, the cologne on his suit now cloying, suffocating. You're stuck with me, and I'm telling you. He leaned down, his spit flying with the words, you don't belong here. The crowd rippled with shock. Phones lifted higher, fingers trembled as record buttons glowed red. Even the Armani-suited customer Michael had just fawned over earlier shifted uncomfortably. The mask of luxury service shattered before his eyes. Olivia didn't back away. Her tone didn't rise. If anything, she grew calmer, more deliberate. I'd still like to speak with someone in charge. Michael's face flushed crimson, his jaw working like a grinder about to snap. He threw his arms wide, turning in a circle to address the gawking crowd. You hear this? Hoodie girl wants the owner. Like she has a right to demand anything. He spun back, venom dripping from his sneer. Look at yourself. Jeans, cheap sneakers, hiding under a hood. You think you're somebody. You're nothing. You're a distraction. You're the kind of customer that costs me money. Jessica Miller's lips parted, her face pale as ash. Michael, maybe we should shut up, he barked, whirling on her with a fury that made her take 2 steps back. Stay out of this. That was the crack in the dam. His polished fake manager persona had collapsed. What remained was raw rage, ugly, snarling, uncontrollable. Daniel Lopez couldn't hold his tongue any longer. He stepped forward, his voice strong even as his hands shook. She hasn't done anything wrong. She asked for help. That's it, and you've been humiliating her since she walked in. Michael spun like a predator sighting prey, his fingers stabbing toward Daniel. You wanna run your mouth? You're fired. Out. Get the hell out of my store. The silence was deafening. Customers gasped. A woman clapped a hand over her mouth. Daniel's eyes widened, but he stood taller, his jaw set. If standing up for basic respect gets me fired, then so be it. Michael's lip curled into a snarl. Good. Grab your cheap watch and your minimum wage dignity, and get out. We don't need bleeding hearts like you. That was when Olivia finally let her calm slip, just a fraction. Her voice trembled with something sharper than anger, disappointment. You can't treat people like this, she said, her eyes steady, her words soft but razor-edged. Not employees, not customers, not anyone. This isn't who we're supposed to be. Michael's laugh was savage. We? He stepped into her space, towering over her, his spit flecking with every word. There is no we. There's me, the man who keeps this place running, and there's you, a hood rat wasting my time. Watch me show you how this is done. He was shaking now, vibrating with his own fury, his chest heaving like a bull about to charge. His voice grew louder, harsher, unhinged. This is a high-end establishment for high-end customers. Not some charity for people who roll in off the street thinking they can demand service. You think that hood makes you special. You think that card you flashed makes you somebody. You're nothing. You're trash. And you will never belong here. The store froze, the words dripped poison into every corner, filling the silence with the reek of bigotry and arrogance. And then in a single motion Michael's hand swung. The crack of flesh against flesh exploded like a gunshot. Olivia's head snapped to the side, her hood falling back, her cheek blazing red. Gasps erupted around them. Someone screamed. Phones shook as cameras zoomed in. Jessica clapped both hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Daniel surged forward instinctively, but Olivia raised a hand to stop him, her movements deliberate, measured, controlled even in the wake of violence. She straightened slowly, her fingers brushing the heat of the handprint glowing across her cheek. The silence that followed was like the air before a storm. Customers held their breath. Phones captured every detail. The wild gleam in Michael's eyes, the trembling in his raised hand, the calm fire burning in Olivia's. For the first time since this spectacle began, Michael's smirk faltered. The adrenaline was fading and the reality of what he'd just done seeped into the corners of his mind. Around him 50 witnesses stood in stunned silence, recording every second of his downfall. But Olivia Carter's voice, when it finally broke that silence, was soft, terrifyingly soft. "Your store." 2 words. Calm, steady, lethal. Michael Harris didn't know it yet, but those 2 words had already destroyed him. The store had gone dead silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the blood rushing in everyone's ears. Olivia Carter stood with her hood down now, her cheek flaming red with the fresh mark of Michael Harris's hand. Her eyes locked on him, calm, steady, terrifyingly steady. "Your store," she repeated, her voice quiet but every syllable struck like a hammer. Michael blinked, sweat glistening on his forehead. For the first time the mask of arrogant confidence cracked. His eyes darted around at the sea of phones recording, the crowd frozen like statues, and something primal began to stir: fear. He forced a laugh, but it came out shrill, broken. "You don't get it," he said, pointing at her again, voice trembling between rage and desperation. "You're nobody. You walk in here looking like you just rolled out of a shelter, demanding to see the owner. You don't get to make the rules. I do. This is my place. Mine." Before Olivia could reply, the glass doors at the front swung open. The sound of leather shoes striking marble filled the space like a drumbeat of judgment. First came Robert King, broad shoulders, tailored security uniform, a man who radiated authority. Behind him walked 2 executives in charcoal suits, their expressions cold, sharp, all business. Their presence cut through the air like a blade. Every customer's head turned. Every phone shifted to capture the arrival. Jessica Miller's clipboard clattered to the floor as her face drained of color. Daniel Lopez froze mid-step, his eyes wide as the pieces began to click. But it was what happened next that shattered Michael's world. The suits didn't look at him. They didn't even acknowledge the man who had been strutting through the store like a king. Instead, their eyes went straight to Olivia, the woman in the hoodie with a handprint still burning on her cheek. They stopped in front of her, posture deferential, voices respectful. "Miss Carter," one of them said, his tone solemn. "We came as soon as you called." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Michael's smirk collapsed into nothing. His jaw unhinged, his face draining pale. "Miss Carter," he stammered, looking from Olivia to the suits, then back to Olivia again. Wait, no. That can't be. She's wearing a hoodie." It was the most pathetic line he could have delivered, but it slipped out anyway, naked and pitiful. Even in the face of ruin, Michael's brain couldn't process that someone who dressed like Olivia could wield power. His prejudice was so deep, so twisted, that reality itself shattered against it. Olivia straightened fully now, her hood no longer hiding her. The storm inside her was gone, all that remained was cold clarity. Her voice cut across the marble floor, each word crisp and final. "I'm Olivia Carter. I built this company. I own this store, and you just assaulted me." The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. The chandeliers seemed to dim. Michael staggered back as if the words themselves had struck him across the face. His hands fluttered uselessly at his sides, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Jessica whispered the truth aloud, her voice trembling as she pressed a hand to her forehead. "Oh God, the CEO. I just watched him slap the CEO." Gasps echoed, phones zoomed closer. Customers murmured in disbelief, some shaking their heads, others already imagining the headlines this would make. Grace Kim, the businesswoman who had nearly purchased a laptop, raised her phone higher, her face hard with righteous fury. Michael stumbled forward, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "Miss Carter. I didn't know. You can't blame me for that. How was I supposed to know? Look at how you're dressed. You look like. He choked, unable to finish the thought, knowing that saying it aloud would expose everything ugly festering inside him. Olivia didn't flinch, she didn't raise her voice, she simply asked, "I look like what, Michael?" Her calm was devastating. Each syllable cut deeper than his shouting ever could. The customers leaned in, the tension so tight it threatened to snap. Michael sputtered, "I thought you were not important, I thought you didn't belong here." His voice cracked, his confidence in tatters. "You don't dress like someone who runs a company. You don't act like what?" Olivia pressed her gaze steady, "Like I deserve respect. Like I should be treated as a human being." She stepped closer, her presence towering now, the roles completely reversed. "Tell me, Michael, how many people have you dismissed, insulted, humiliated, because you thought their clothes or their skin or their sneakers told you everything you needed to know?" Her words struck harder than any slap. Michael's knees trembled. "I didn't mean it like that," he stammered, though the cameras caught the lie twisting his face. "I was just doing my job, protecting the brand. You can't put this on me." But the crowd wasn't buying it. Murmurs swelled, angry, disgusted. One man muttered, "Protecting the brand. He is the problem." Another customer shook her head, saying loud enough for the cameras to catch, "He treats people like trash, and she's the CEO. Oh, he's done." Robert King stepped forward now, his bulk shadowing Michael. "You need to leave the premises," he said, voice low and final. His hand clamped down on Michael's arm like iron. Michael jerked free, his voice climbing into hysteria. "No, you can't do this. I've been running this store for years. I've made sales, I've hit quotas, I'm the one who keeps this place alive. He pointed at Olivia, shaking. "She set me up. Dressing like that, tricking me, how's that fair?" The words echoed with pure desperation, stripped of dignity. The crowd recoiled, the last scraps of his reputation shredded in real time. Olivia's reply was measured, devastating in its simplicity. "Fair. Fair is treating every single person who walks through these doors with dignity. Fair is remembering that Electramax was built on respect, not arrogance. You failed, Michael. And now the whole world gets to see it." The customers erupted into whispers, some nodding, some already typing on their phones. Hashtags were forming, headlines being written, reputations being destroyed and built in the same moment. Michael tried one last time, his voice breaking. "Please, Miss Carter. I didn't know. If I'd known it was you." Olivia cut him off, her tone sharper than steel. "If you'd known it was me, you would have treated me differently. That's the problem." The weight of those words slammed down harder than security's grip on his arm. Michael sagged, his shoulders collapsing inward, his face pale and wet with sweat. The man who had strutted like a king an hour ago now looked like a broken shell, his empire crumbling in front of the very customers he had once dismissed. As Robert escorted him to the door, his final protest rang hollow, pathetic. "You have to understand, she looked like she didn't belong here." The doors shut behind him with a heavy thud, cutting off the sound of his voice, cutting off his career. The store exhaled. The toxic air that had poisoned every corner evaporated. Olivia stood tall, the red mark on her cheek still blazing, her empire watching, her words carrying to every ear. "From this moment on, Electramax will not be a place where appearance determines worth. We will be better. We must be better." And the crowd, silent no more, erupted in applause. The applause rolled through the Electramax showroom like a wave breaking against the shore. Customers clapped, some whistled, others raised their phones higher to capture the moment that was already destined to explode across the internet. Olivia Carter didn't smile. Her cheek still burned from the slap, and her chest carried the weight of what had just unfolded. This wasn't about triumph, it was about accountability. It was about setting things right. Her gaze swept the room. Daniel standing tall despite the sting of being fired minutes ago, Jessica frozen with fear and shame, customers watching wide-eyed, torn between shock and awe. Olivia stepped forward, her presence commanding without effort. The room fell silent again, as if every person there knew they were about to hear a verdict. She turned to Daniel first. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched, but his eyes burned with the courage that had made him speak when no one else dared. Olivia's voice softened, but carried strength. "Daniel Lopez," she said, clear enough for every phone to record, "you are not fired. You are rehired immediately, and promoted to assistant manager." Gasps filled the air. Daniel's eyes widened, his mouth parting in disbelief. "Ma'am, Olivia held up a hand, steady. "You showed me what true leadership looks like. You had the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it cost you your job. That is what Electromax should represent. That is what we will represent moving forward." Daniel blinked, his throat tight. For a moment he couldn't speak, then finally he managed, "Thank you, Miss Carter. I won't let you down." The relief and gratitude in his voice sent a ripple of emotion through the crowd. Customers nodded, some murmuring approval. The phones caught it all, the story of a young man vindicated. Then Olivia turned to Jessica. The assistant manager looked as if she were about to collapse under the weight of her own guilt. Her hands trembled, her lips quivered, her eyes brimmed with tears. She had watched, silent, while Michael tore people apart. She had stayed quiet, afraid of losing her job, afraid of what speaking out might cost her. "Jessica Miller," Olivia said, her tone firmer now. Jessica flinched at her own name. "You failed. You stood by while your manager humiliated customers, while he insulted them, while he abused them. You knew it was wrong, and you stayed silent." Tears spilled down Jessica's cheeks. "I know. I was afraid. I have a daughter. She depends on me. I thought if I spoke up, I'd lose my job, and then I'd lose everything." The crowd watched, silent, waiting for Olivia's judgment. Olivia's eyes softened, but her voice carried no weakness. "Fear doesn't excuse silence, Jessica, but it explains it, and today, I choose to give you a second chance. You'll keep your job, but you will enroll in company-wide bias training, and you will work with me personally to ensure that what happened today never happens again." Jessica's knees almost buckled with relief. She pressed both hands to her face, sobbing. Thank you, Miss Carter. I won't waste this chance." Olivia nodded once. "Don't thank me. Earn it." The customers murmured, some nodding in approval, others impressed by the balance of justice and mercy. Phones caught every word, every tremble in Jessica's voice, every inch of Olivia's composure. Finally Olivia turned to the staff as a whole, and then to the customers still lingering, still filming, still stunned. Her voice rose, not in anger, but in authority. "I want everyone to hear this clearly," she began. "I sometimes walk into my own stores like this. Dressed down, hoodie, sneakers, ordinary. Why? Because I want to see who you really are when you think no one important is watching." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Phones zoomed closer, capturing the fire in her eyes, the red mark still blazing on her cheek. "Today," she continued, "I learned more about the culture of this store than any quarterly report or meeting ever could. I learned who stands up for what's right. I learned who hides in silence. And I learned just how toxic leadership can poison an entire building." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the hum of the electronics seemed to fade. Olivia's words carved into the air like stone. "From this day forward, Electromax will not judge customers by their clothes, by their sneakers, by how much money you think they have in their wallet. From this day forward, we will judge people only by their character. We will treat every single person who walks through these doors with dignity, with respect, with humanity. That is the future of this company. That is non-negotiable." A smattering of applause began, then swelled until the whole store erupted again. Customers clapped, some shouted, yes, others cheered Daniel's name. The applause wasn't just for Olivia's words, it was for the promise of change, the promise that this empire could be something more than just another snobbish brand. Daniel stood straighter, his shoulders squared with new pride. Jessica wiped her tears, determination flickering behind her eyes. The security guard near the door shifted his stance, his suspicion gone, replaced with respect. Olivia let the applause run its course, then lifted her hand, bringing the room back to silence. Her voice softened again, almost intimate, as if she were speaking directly to each person in the store. Respect isn't optional, respect isn't conditional, respect is the foundation of everything we do, and if anyone in this company can't live by that standard, then they don't belong here. The words landed like a gavel striking. Final, absolute. Around her, customers nodded, whispering, their phones capturing what would soon flood social media, clips of Michael's arrogance, of the slap, of his downfall. Clips of Daniel's promotion, Jessica's reprieve, and Olivia's speech. By the time the day ended, millions would know what had happened here. But for Olivia, this wasn't about going viral, this was about repairing the heart of what she had built. About reminding everyone, staff, customers, and herself, that dignity was worth more than profit. She turned, gave Daniel a steady nod, and finally let herself exhale. Justice had been served, but the work was just beginning. The storm of attention came fast, as Olivia Carter knew it would. Within hours, news anchors repeated her words, hashtags surged across social media, and millions watched the slap that ended a career. But for Olivia, the moment in the store was never meant to be a viral spectacle, it was a mirror held up to her own company. A mirror that revealed cracks she could no longer ignore. In the weeks that followed, Electromax became the focus of both admiration and scrutiny. Customers flooded stores, some out of curiosity, others in solidarity, expecting to see whether Olivia's words, "respect is not optional," would become reality, or fade as corporate spin. Olivia refused to let it fade. She gathered her executive team in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking Manhattan. The tone was not celebratory, it was surgical. "We are not here to bask in attention," she told them. Her eyes hard, "We are here because the culture of this company failed. I built Electromax on dignity, but somewhere along the way, arrogance took root. Michael Harris was not an outlier, he was a symptom. If we don't change, everything we've built will rot from the inside." A plan took shape. Every employee, from sales associates to senior executives, would undergo mandatory empathy and bias training, not as a checkbox exercise, but as an ongoing program built into the DNA of the company. Olivia made herself the face of it, speaking at sessions, telling her own story of foster care, ramen dinners, and humiliation. She wanted employees to understand that respect was not just a corporate value, it was personal. Mystery shopper programs were overhauled. Olivia wasn't the only one going undercover anymore. Executives rotated through stores, disguised as ordinary customers. Associates never knew who might walk in, a regional VP in sneakers, a finance director in sweatpants. Within months, managers stopped seeing hoodies and started seeing people. Daniel Lopez became more than an assistant manager. He was chosen to lead a pilot mentorship program, guiding younger staff on how to balance sales with sincerity, quotas with compassion. His story inspired associates who once felt invisible. Employees whispered about him with pride, the guy who stood up and got noticed by the CEO. His courage reshaped not just policies, but attitudes. Jessica Miller carried her guilt into her new role as a trainer. She stood in front of rooms filled with employees and confessed her silence. She described the knot in her stomach every time she ignored Michael's cruelty, and the shame of realizing her daughter might one day face the same treatment. Her vulnerability turned into power. People listened, not because she was perfect, but because she had failed, and then chosen differently. Even the Fifth Avenue store, once infamous, became a model. Sales didn't dip after the scandal, they soared. Customers who had abandoned Electromax returned, drawn not just to the products but to the promise of dignity. The store manager's office was no longer a throne, but a hub for collaboration. Associates who once whispered in fear now spoke freely about concerns, knowing their voices mattered. Other companies noticed. Walmart, Best Buy, Target sent observers to study Electromax's new customer-first culture. Business schools wrote case studies, not about the slap itself, but about what came after, the rebuilding, the leadership choices, the willingness to admit failure and transform. And Michael Harris, his name faded into a cautionary tale. The videos remained, his outbursts forever memorialized online, but the world moved on. What endured wasn't his collapse, but Electramax's renewal. Months later, Olivia stood again in a store, this time in Chicago, wearing jeans, hair tied back, no entourage. She watched a young associate patiently explain features to a teenager in a hoodie. The associate smiled, listened, treated the kid with the same care as the suit browsing laptops nearby. Olivia didn't intervene, she didn't need to. The culture had shifted, the values were alive again. Back in her office that evening, Olivia looked at the framed photograph on her wall, not of the slap, not of her Forbes cover, but of the Fifth Avenue staff, standing together weeks after the scandal, united, determined, smiling. Underneath, a single word was etched: respect. The viral moment had lit the fire, but the true legacy was the slow, deliberate rebuilding of trust, dignity, and culture, proving to the world, and to herself, that Electramax was not defined by one man's failure, but by the choice to rise beyond it. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.